everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny and I'm here today to bring you a tag video. This is the ratings and review tag by Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. Excuse me if my eyes are going this way, it's where my notes are. And I was tagged by Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures. Thank you so much for the tag, Berna. So this is all about, like it says, how you rate and review books. So I'm going to answer the questions for you today. Number one was tagging people, and in case you don't know, I don't usually directly tag people, so consider yourself tagged if you'd like to do this tag. But yeah, I don't usually call people out for that. Number two, how do you know when you've just finished a good book? Is it a thinking or a feeling response? And I'm going to say both. If I am being perfectly honest, it's usually a feeling. I usually have an emotional response that's generated from a book that I would consider a good book. But I can also read something and not feel much about it, but know intellectually that it is a good book. So know that it was well written, know that it was well researched, know that it set out what it was trying to do, in the synopsis or whatever the point of the book was, to know that it did a good job of that. But to not have that emotional connection to it, so it ends up having a different response from me. And that can happen when I'm reading nonfiction, where I feel like the book was well executed, but it wasn't something that I felt loving feelings for. So that's kind of how that works out for me. When you begin to form your review or rating, what is the first question you ask yourself? The first question I ask myself when I'm forming my review or rating is if I had that feeling, so that feeling of connection to, if it's fiction, the characters, and to the overall scenario that was played out in the book. And otherwise, I am asking myself if I would recommend the book to someone, if I would read it again, if I think it's good enough that I want to have it in my collection to evoke those feelings of when I read it. Those are kind of the things that are forming in my mind for ratings. I don't write a lot of reviews. I do my reviews here on BookTube. I do them verbally most of the time. So that is how reviews come about for me. Number 4 is, do you do star ratings? Why or why not? So I do star ratings because I use Goodreads, and for me, they're a way to help other people who are looking for books that might be looking for those books to get their general impression of what the average reader is thinking around when they've read it. And yeah, I think that's why I do them. There's not really any other reason other than probably, being able to sort based on the star reviews on Goodreads as well. So, and then I do also do star ratings for my library catalog. And I do that because I think there's just so many books that a library has in their collection, and whoever is in the online catalog can maybe be recommended a book based on people who have read it, giving it a star rating and giving it a higher profile in the library's database. Okay, so if your answer is yes, what do you give book star ratings? Explain your star rating system. What does a good book get in your star rating system? So in my star rating system, a good book can range anywhere from a 3 to a 5. And the 3 is kind of my pivotal rate. So if I really like a book, I think it's good, and I, connected with it, and I enjoyed the story, and it kept me entertained, it'll most likely get a 4. If I adore a book, if I love it, if I feel like I connected to the characters, I wanted it to keep going, there's so many reasons, but if I love a book, it gets a 5. And if I thought it was good enough, but, had some problems with it, didn't think it was great, like didn't hit all the things for me, but it was good enough, it'll have a 3. I can also give a 3 out as a kind of, what would I call it? I would call it an acquiesce. I would give a book a 3 if I knew categorically that it was a pretty good book, but it's just not my kind of book. So I do that because I don't think it's fair to take a book that wasn't written with me as its audience, and I know that and I can tell that, and then give it a 2. Because I think that that's unfair to the book. Because it still has some merit. It still would appeal to a certain group of people, and I understand who those people are. They're just not me. So a 3 can also mean that for me. So obviously, if Goodreads allowed for more detailed rating system, I would be giving a 3.5 to a book that I really enjoyed but had some flaws and kind of felt was in the middle for me. And I would give, just a 3 to a book that I know is good, but I just... it just didn't connect with me as a reader, so I don't want to give it a higher rating than that. I would say I give most books 4 stars, like the books that I like. I have to, like I said, love it to give it a 5 star. And some books get close, and then I would probably give them a 4.75. They would be really close to a 5 to me, but just didn't quite hit the exact thing that it needed to have. Number 6 is, what book that you hated have you recommended? And that one is tough for me. I can't think of a book that I've hated that I've recommended. What's coming to mind is the book Magma, and it's an Icelandic name, the author, so I'll just put the name here. Because I felt very strongly about that book, and knowing that I didn't like the message that it had, but I think after hearing other women review it, I know that it resonated very differently for those women who had been through a similar situation. So I guess if someone was, looking for a book in that vein, which I find hard to believe, but perhaps I would recommend the Magma, but it's a stretch. I normally don't think that I would recommend a book I've hated. I just don't see what the point would be to that. Number 7 is, what makes a book good, bad, or great by your evaluation? I think a great book is one that has a wide appeal. And so good is kind of one that I really love and enjoy and personally have a connection to. Great is a book that is one that is those things that I said about good, but also one that I think would have a mass appeal to a larger group of people. And bad usually means poorly written, misleading, or not following through with its mandate as I see it. What else? Cliches sometimes I consider bad. And really like narrow and not well-developed characters I would probably consider bad as well. So I kind of just answered part of number 8, which is, when evaluating the quality of a book, do you have specific criteria or aspects of the book, such as character development, that you consider? Does this change if you are writing an in-depth review versus just thinking about the book for enjoyment? I review or I rate books for the Book2 Prize, for example. So I have a different criteria for those books than I do for my own rating system. And that's because I feel like book prizes, this is very just my own opinion, but I feel like book prizes have this kind of position of power with people. And so when I'm evaluating books, as I am right now in nonfiction for the Book2 Prize, I want to consider what book appeals to a wider audience and who I think would get the most out of it, but not just who I think would get the most out of it, but like what is vast, what can appeal to a wide variety of different types of readers. So that is something that I consider for everybody, but character development for me is super, super important for, and the depth of character, layers of character. They don't even have to be super in-depth portraits of a character. It can be a short story, it can be a poem, but it has to reveal something and reveal layers and movement with the character. And I think usually I have to relate on some level to the character, like have some sort of connection or some sort of understanding. There has to be some movement felt for me between the person and the character and myself. Number 9 is, do you consider star ratings or average ratings when choosing books to add to your TBR or to read? Sometimes. So I don't look it up as a make or break usually. If I'm sometimes out book shopping and I am contemplating picking out a book between different books, I might look at the Goodreads average rating of it. But I don't tend to. I really am very instinctual about buying and what I'm going to read. Based on my own interests, based on my own, they can definitely be based on recommendations from another booktuber or from a friend or from a family member. But I rarely consider ratings. One time I did look up some ratings because I do run a little book club for the Thrive Together network. And so we have book suggestions every year. And then everyone rates books. So they go through and tell me like the order of the books they'd be interested in reading for the choices. And sometimes I do look up the ratings for those because I have a little bit of power in the situation because ultimately I decide the list. And I do want to see if the book has a low rating because I think for me, I'm always going to read the books for this book club. And so I want to make sure it's not going to be a book that I hate if it's a suggestion from someone else and I'm not really sure if it's not a book I would have picked out or chosen on my own. So yeah. Number 10 is who on BookTube does reliable and interesting reviews of books that you know you can use to decide if a book is for you or not, and what makes their reviews so good. So to be honest, I have had some hits and some misses with BookTube reviewers. And that's, I think, to be expected. I've read many books based on BookTubers' suggestions, and some of them have turned out well, and some of them have not been as successful. And I think that's fair enough. I am trying to think right now who I would trust implicitly, and I actually don't think I can pick out anybody. For the most part, I think Dee Dee at Brown Girl Reading does good reviews that I can trust. I think our tastes mostly align from past experience. And then I would say Olive from A Book Olive, I think her reviews are very concise and usually give me a really good idea of whether or not I will get along well with the book as well. So I'm gonna say those two for now. And that's not to say that I haven't read books based on other booktubers' recommendations, because I have. Just that, you know, sometimes they hit and sometimes they don't. And I don't think that's actually anyone's fault. It's just a matter of taste, right? And sometimes someone's description of something doesn't necessarily transfer into your taste completely, even though their review was so positive. 11, does those booktubers use different language than you to evaluate and review the overall quality of a book? Yes, I would say Olive definitely does. She I think has the reviewer mindset, because she does write reviews for publication, as does Jen from Jen Campbell's channel. So they both have a very analytical and I think very objective ways of looking at books, which I really appreciate. I think Dee Dee has a different perspective than me on life in general, and I really appreciate that about her and her reading. And so I think that she's just honest and presents the books from just her emotional connection to them or not. And so I just really appreciate that. I don't know if she uses a different language really than me in describing them, but more that she just has her own perspective that she's coming from, and it's a perspective that I appreciate as a woman who is also a writer. She's also African American, coming from her own perspective of living in France, and so she has kind of this American European view of the world. And I think she champions African and African American literature. So, I just really appreciate her reviews and finding out what books she's looking at and adding them to my own TBR if I feel like they're going to align with my tastes. So yeah, that is the ratings and review tag by Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. And I hope you enjoyed hearing those answers, Berna, and thank you so much for tagging me. And I will be back again soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching.